As Trump rushes to settle the Iran war, another regional rivalry may be edging closer to a far more dangerous phase. Is Benjamin Netanyahu preparing to open a new war front, this time involving a formal NATO ally of the United States? The Israel-Turkey clash appears to be brewing fast, with Hitler jibes from Ankara and growing Israeli warnings about Turkey as a rising strategic threat adding fuel to the fire. And it may no longer be only about Palestine, because Syria, regional influence, and competing security ambitions are emerging as three other major fault lines in the Israel-Turkey rivalry. Speculation about a possible Turkey-Israel war has intensified as the wider Middle East conflict sharpens old hostilities and pushes both sides into a more openly confrontational posture. Tension surged further after Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan likened Benjamin Netanyahu to a modern-day Hitler, adding to the already toxic war of words between Ankara and Tel Aviv. A British daily also falsely quoted Erdogan as threatening to invade Israel, but that report was later taken down after questions were raised over the authenticity of the remarks. Not just Erdogan, voices from Israel have also turned increasingly anti-Turkey, showing that the rhetoric is hardening on both sides rather than flowing in only one direction. Former Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett described Erdogan as a sophisticated and dangerous adversary, warning that Turkey is emerging as a serious long-term challenge for Israel. Turkey and Israel now appear to be moving beyond petty disputes and are increasingly viewing each other as strategic rivals with competing regional ambitions. While Palestine remains a core driver of hostility, the tensions are now spreading across several strategic fronts, including regional influence, Syria, maritime routes, and broader Middle East power alignments. Syria is more than just a side theater in the Israel-Turkey rivalry. It is a central arena tied directly to both Israel's security calculations and Turkey's wider regional ambitions. Ankara wants a more stable and unified Syria under a friendly post-Assad order. Israeli military actions in Syria are increasingly clashing with Turkish goals. With both sides expanding their military posture, Syria could become the arena where Turkey and Israel slide into direct friction. Israel's growing outreach in the eastern Mediterranean is adding a new layer of tension. Israel's cooperation with Greece and Cyprus continues to irritate Ankara. Israeli outreach in the region appears designed in part to constrain Turkey's maritime reach and energy ambitions. Naval strategy, alliance politics, and competition over energy corridors are all feeding mistrust. The Kurdish issue remains one of Turkey's most sensitive national security concerns. Turkish media and analysts have alleged that Israel could try to use Kurdish actors to pressure Ankara. Israel could seek leverage through Kurdish groups in Iraq or Syria. If proxy warfare expands around Kurdish actors, the Turkey-Israel rivalry could become far more explosive and potentially drift toward open conflict. Recently, Turkey became embroiled in a diplomatic spat after Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu made sharp remarks targeting President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, prompting an angry response from Ankara. The United Kingdom's The Telegraph later removed an article that had claimed Erdogan threatened a potential invasion of Israel. In its April 12 report, the publication stated that Erdogan had accused Benjamin Netanyahu of being driven by hostility and violence. The report also suggested that Erdogan warned of a possible Israeli invasion similar to past conflicts in Libya and Nagorno-Karabakh. However, it later emerged that the statements attributed to Erdogan were drawn from remarks made in 2024. Those comments were originally delivered during a party meeting in July 2024, according to Middle East Eye. The Turkish government issued a strong response on April 13, roughly a day after the report was published. Officials in Ankara stated that the claims presented in the article were entirely inaccurate and lacked factual basis. Turkey's official statement said, and I quote, "The assertions in these posts do not reflect the facts and constitute narratives intended to undermine regional stability." In line with its long-standing state tradition and vision, the Republic of Turkey has consistently assumed a leading role, both in our region and beyond, in advocating for an end to bloodshed, the protection of civilians, and the establishment of lasting peace. Manipulative contents that seek to distort Turkey's efforts and humanitarian stance should not be given credence. As it has in the past, Turkey will continue to be a voice of justice and peace in the region. End quote. Following the backlash, the newspaper removed the article and acknowledged that the cited quotes were either outdated or inaccurately presented. Despite the retraction, other outlets, including Israeli media such as the Jerusalem Post, had already circulated the claims. The episode unfolded at a time when tensions between NATO member Turkey and Israel were already increasing. In a recent statement, Turkey's foreign minister characterized Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's approach as aggressive and destabilizing. Speaking to Anadolu Agency on April 13, Hakan Fidan stated that Israel's current posture increasingly positions Turkey as a potential focus of concern. Fidan further argued that Israel's strategic outlook relies on identifying adversaries and may shift its attention toward Turkey after Iran. He added that Israel appears to be developing a narrative aimed at portraying Turkey as its next perceived threat. The Turkish foreign minister said, and I quote, "After Iran, Israel cannot live without an enemy. We see that they are in search of developing a new rhetoric and declaring Turkey as the new enemy. We see that not only Netanyahu's administration, but also some figures in the opposition, though not all, are seeking to declare Turkey the new enemy. This is a new development in Israel, turning into a state strategy." End quote. Turkey also extended its criticism to regional partners, including Greece and Cyprus, over their defense cooperation with Israel. Fidan questioned the rationale behind Greece expanding military ties with Israel despite its existing NATO membership. The Turkish foreign minister said, and I quote, "We see that Greece is pursuing highly risky policies here. There are very interesting aspects in Greece attempting to follow a type of policy that no other country in Europe is pursuing on its own. Neither Greece nor southern Cyprus needs military cooperation with Israel. Greece is already a member of NATO, and southern Cyprus has the backing of the EU. What strategic logic could justify seeking this kind of cooperation is something they cannot explain to me either. This is most likely an imposition on the government made under external pressure." End quote. The Turkish Foreign Ministry issued a statement on April 11 in response to remarks made by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu about President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. Turkey's reaction came after Netanyahu said Erdogan had massacred his own Kurdish citizens, a charge that immediately triggered a fierce and unusually personal response from the Turkish side. The Israeli Prime Minister made those remarks on X while also vowing to continue fighting the Iranian regime despite the ceasefire. In its response, the Turkish government invoked Netanyahu's alleged war crimes and went so far as to describe him as the Hitler of our time. Turkish Foreign Ministry statement said, and I quote, "Netanyahu, who has been described as the Hitler of our time due to the crimes he has committed, is a well-known figure with a clear track record. An arrest warrant has been issued against Netanyahu by the International Criminal Court on charges of war crimes and crimes against humanity. Under Netanyahu's administration, Israel is facing proceedings before the International Court of Justice on charges of genocide. Netanyahu's current objective is to undermine ongoing peace negotiations and continue his expansionist policies in the region. Failing this, he risks being tried in his own country and is likely to be sentenced to imprisonment. The fact that our president has been targeted by Israeli officials with baseless, brazen, and false allegations is a result of the discomfort caused by the truths we have consistently voiced on every platform. Turkey will continue to stand by innocent civilians and will further its efforts to ensure that Netanyahu is held accountable for the crimes he has committed." Unquote. Earlier, former Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett had warned that Turkey posed a new and growing threat, suggesting that concerns in Israel are now expanding beyond Iran alone. Bennett made those remarks while addressing the 2026 Conference of Presidents of Major American Jewish Organizations, using the forum to outline what he sees as Israel's evolving regional dangers. According to I-24 News, Bennett described Erdogan as a sophisticated and dangerous adversary, portraying the Turkish president as a strategic challenge that Israel can no longer afford to ignore. Naftali Bennett said, and I quote, "Erdogan is a sophisticated and dangerous adversary who wants to surround Israel. The country must not turn a blind eye again. While certain Israeli officials are on Qatari payroll, Qatar and Turkey, which is based in Syria, and with Israeli consent in Gaza are feeding a new monstrous axis of the Muslim Brotherhood similar to the Iranian one. A new Turkish threat is emerging. We must act in different ways, but simultaneously against the threat from Tehran and against the hostility from Ankara. I must tell the truth. Israel's current leadership divided us and is dividing us now more than ever. I will not let the leadership that failed continue. I intend to lead Israel into its next chapter, stronger. After 3 decades since coming to power, and after the greatest disaster in Israel's history occurred on his watch, a leader must know when to step down with dignity. Israel is greater than any one person. The next chapter must be written by new leadership, without those people responsible for the disaster. Unquote. Israel now appears to be projecting Turkey as a new existential threat even as the Iran ceasefire remains in place.